Hi, my name is Maggie, and I am a beloved child of God, and so are you. I have a trick to show you. I have a glass of water, ordinary glass of water, and an index card. It's a little damp because of what I was just doing, but it's just a plain index card. I'm going to put it on top of my glass of water, tump it over. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Were you a little scared when I tumped it over, thinking I was going to spill water everywhere? I kind of was a little. I don't know exactly why this happens. It has something to do with the pressure. Like this air inside the glass kind of creates a vacuum and holds the water up. And I know the water's sticking to the index card. So the water's not coming out. What if I had done that over your head or over your computer or tablet or something, or your TV? Wouldn't you have been afraid that I was going to get water everywhere? Would you have trusted me? I don't know. I don't think I'd want anybody doing it. I don't think I would do it over my computer now, even though I've seen that the water's not going to come out. I don't think I would still go and do it over my tablet or computer or phone. I don't trust it fully, even though I've seen it. That's what we're talking about today. As human beings trusting. And where do we place our trust? Well, I'll ask you, where should we place our trust? You know the answer. Every time. It's God. We should be placing our trust in God. Our lectionary today has great stories. I mean, like top-notch stories about trusting God. It has, from the Old Testament, it gives us two options in our lectionary, but both of them are so good. They're like the ideal trusting God stories. There's the story in Samuel. So Samuel is the prophet. Remember when we talked about the little boy Samuel who heard the voice of God calling him? And it's a beautiful story how like his mother actually asked for Samuel to be born, and God in these moments of vulnerability. So here's Samuel, and he's now telling these Israelites he's the voice of God. He is telling them what God wants them to do. And they've come to him several times, and they're saying, we want a king. We want a king so that there can be somebody here on earth that's leading us, like in addition to God. And Samuel's like, you have God. You have God ruling you and leading you. Why would you want a king? Kings aren't great. Kings do a lot of rotten things to their people. You don't want a king. And they pestered him and pestered him. So he goes to God, and God says, Samuel, don't feel bad. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. This is what I've been dealing with all these years. The very people that I saved from Egypt have been not trusting me. They don't trust me to rule them. So you go back and tell them they don't really want a king. And so Samuel goes back and tells them, you don't really want a king. It's not a good idea. But the Israelites don't listen. They want to be like every other nation. Every other nation has a king who's fancy and shows their power and their might. Every other nation has a king on earth that's leading them and telling them what to do. They want to be like every other nation. Does that sound familiar to you in your life at all? Do you ever want to be like other people? I know I do. So they get their king. They get their king against all of Samuel's warnings. They get their king. They get Saul. Saul is a human, and he messes up big time as king. And that's another story for another day, but he messes up big time as king. Do you know how? He doesn't trust God. He doesn't follow through exactly what God has told him to do. So he's human. The other story from the Old Testament is Adam and Eve. And we know the story, Adam and Eve. They're in the Garden of Eden. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's fabulous. Just don't go near that tree and don't eat that fruit off of that tree. That's all I ask you guys, okay? The snake tricks Eve or tells Eve, maybe there's something God's not telling you. You sure you really trust this God guy? And Eve takes the fruit, and Eve shares it with Adam. And this whole time, they're not trusting God. And where our story finds them today is they hear God walking through the garden. Isn't that a beautiful image just to think about that? Let's stop for a second. Think about God. God making himself small enough to walk through that garden, to be with Adam and Eve. Now, God knows everything about us. He knows where we are. He knows who we are. He knows what we want even if we don't know what we want, and he knows what's best for us. God made himself small enough so that he could walk amongst the garden to find his precious Adam and his precious Eve. Do you know what they did? They hid from him. They thought they could hide from God. Do you ever think that you could hide from God? Have you ever done something or thought something and said, okay, but just let's keep that quiet? I know I have. I know there's thoughts that I thought, oh, I don't want God to know I'm thinking those thoughts. Now I realize that God knew I was thinking those thoughts before I even knew I was thinking those thoughts. And you know what? He loved me anyway. You can't hide from God. And God said, why are you hiding from me? And Adam said, because I ate of that fruit and I realized I was naked. And God said, who told you this? Again, God knows who told him this. I'm reminded now of when my children come to me and they tell me something that somebody has said, either hurtful to them or something I don't really want them to be focusing on in their daily lives that I think might bring them pain or sorrow. My first question, and I think it's a way of me kind of pausing in my pain, is to say, who said that? Who said that to you? Not that it makes a difference who said it to you, but it's my pain and my wanting to understand where this is coming from. And I think God was in pain because he knew, and he knew that Adam and Eve were in pain. He knew they were scared and they were worried. And then Adam says, well, see, it's not really my fault. Eve's the one who did it. Eve did it. And God turns to Eve and said, it's not really my fault. It's the snake. It's the snake that did it. It wasn't really me. And I thought today, like, what if before Eve ever listened to that snake and went to that tree, what if she had stopped and said, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do here, God. And I'm scared and I really want to go to that tree, God. I want to go to that tree. And you know what? You telling me not to go to that tree makes me want to go even more, God. What if she had stopped in that moment and been vulnerable and asked God for help and leading? Because God was sitting right there saying, please, Eve, just ask me, Eve. I'm right here. But she didn't trust God in that moment. And Adam and Eve didn't trust God in the moments that they hid from him. In our second reading, the letters, we have Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. And this is such a good reading where he has told them, and he starts with, it is written, I believed, therefore I have spoken. He's quoting a psalm. The psalm is actually Psalm 116, verse 10, and it's fully, I believed, therefore I have spoken, but I was greatly afflicted. So even in a time of trouble, my faith is there, and I believe. And Paul's saying, do not lose heart to the Corinthians. He's saying, do not lose heart because I know we're mortal. Mortal means that you live and you die. And just like everything that's mortal will pass away. Our bodies aren't here forever. They're not. And they're not meant to be, because we pass away into greater things and greater closeness with God. And that's the way that it is. And that's what makes life so beautiful. So we're not going to be here forever. We are mortal. We will die. But Paul has said God has given us a treasure. God has given us the most beautiful treasure, and that's the gospel, which is, gospel means the good word. And the good word is that we are loved dearly by God. And the good word is that God sent Jesus here to teach us, to lead us, and to save us, to die for us. That's the good word. And God has given that to us to share and to spread and to show in our lives. And prior to his letter, but prior to these words that he's saying right here, he has talked about how we have a treasure in our jar of clay. You remember a while back, a couple months ago, we talked about the psalm about how we are jars of clay made in the hands of the potter, that God is like, he's like a potter sitting at the wheel and he's making these jars of clay. And I mean, we turn out exactly how God wants us to be by his loving, molding hands. If we can just do his will and pray to be able to do his will again and again and again, he'll mold us into the beautiful jars that we should be. But a jar of clay doesn't last forever. It doesn't. It's not supposed to. It breaks. And so we are these jars that are holding this beautiful treasure. And So prior to in our lectionary, I'd like to read just a couple sentences of what Paul has said. This is in chapter 4, verse 7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. So in these really hard times, when really bad things could be happening to us, we can still have our faith and we can still trust in God. And it's these words: we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. These describe exactly the situation where we find Jesus in our gospel reading today. So in Mark's gospel, I don't even know where we are. I do know where we are. We're in Mark's gospel, and Jesus has, here we are. Jesus has these crowds following him. He's going around and he's doing these impressive miracles, and he's going around with his disciples and he's breaking some rules. He's breaking some of the Jewish laws and the rules. He's healing people and helping people on the Sabbath. His disciples are gathering grain on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees, who are the Jewish leaders, the guys in charge of making sure everybody's following the rules, are starting to worry about him. And they see the crowds following him and they're saying, he's breaking our rules. We got to figure out, we got to take this guy down. And he's getting powerful. And they don't want to let go of their power. So they send a group of scribes to follow him and to try to catch him up. They want to catch him up. They want to say, aha, we got you now, Jesus. Now you can't argue your way out of this. And they can take him down and he won't be a threat anymore. So the scribes are powerful, very respected leaders and very educated men. So when they say something, people listen. And when they say something very serious about somebody, the townsfolk, the people listen and believe what the scribes are saying. So here we are. Jesus has been doing these things. The crowds are starting to follow him. There's a crowd so big swarming him and his disciples that they can't even eat. Jesus doesn't even get to sit with his disciples and replenish their earthly bodies. I think that's important. They don't even get to eat and pull sustenance from the earth. Because are we supposed to rely solely on the earth? Where are we supposed to rely? On God, right? So they don't get to sit down and eat. And his family, Jesus' family, is starting to get worried because they see this stuff. They see this stuff happening, and they worry about their son and their brother and their friend and somebody they love. And they're telling Jesus, please stop. This isn't normal. This is not how normal people behave, Jesus. You are going to get yourself in trouble, and we're worried about you.